Every once in a while, I'll make a video that tries to quantify the unquantifiable. It started with ranking the last bunch of Stanley Cup finals, and now it's led us here, trying to quantify the very worst goalie starts in NHL history. For no other reason than simple morbid curiosity. I created an arbitrary formula using statistics that are quantifiable, and weighted them based on what I consider to be more indicative of having a bad game as a goalie. More goals allowed in less time with fewer shots against. Pause the video if you're curious as to the entire methodology. If you would do it differently, leave a comment below and let me know how. If you're curious where your favorite goalie's worst game ranks, feel free to ask and I'll try to get back to you. Now obviously there are some considerations for specifically the games where the goalie got yanked. Based on his coach's decision, a struggling goalie can either get pulled early, having played like 8 minutes, or left in the net to see if they improve or not. So the time factor is somewhat subject to the temperament of the coach, and thus we have no way of knowing whether or not a bad start would have been buoyed by a better final 52 minutes, and thus the goalie's game wouldn't be that bad. But for the purposes of, well, everything, we can only look at what did happen and the stats that we do have. Now, hockey is a random sport, and one game is not representative of a goalie's skill level at all. This is just as much a look into how shoddily the chips can fall on any given night as it is a celebration of a terrible performance. There's no insight or moral to this story. This is just a fun experiment. So, using StatHead to find all 5,000 plus NHL goalie games with a GAA of at least 5 and a save percentage of under 3/4, which is terrible, these are the very worst statistical performances by a goalie in NHL history. To give you an idea of how cataclysmically bad these starts are, let's get a look at the start that went through this formula and came out as the best of them. 2007 Jackets Blues. Curtis Sanford is in net, and in just over half the game, he gives up 3 goals on 12 shots before getting pulled. 3 on 12 was pretty bad, but there's still plenty of time for him to get that save percentage back up to something respectable, hence why it ranks as the, quote, best worst start here. There's also some hilarious stuff hiding in here too. Mike Vernon takes 25 penalty minutes in just 36 minutes of ice time before getting pulled after allowing 4 goals on 13 shots in April of 1988. And this year, on January 6th, Jacob Markstrom of the Devils faced down the New York Islanders and somehow gave up 9 goals on 24 shots. That's terrible. Like, that's really, really bad. That's so bad. But in the full picture of NHL starts, it's only 45th worst. It gets so much worse, you guys. All games in the top 500 or so are atrocious, but these are the worst that the model spit out. And I got a good enough spread of early pulls and full games to be satisfied, so let's start reading. The first of them happened, mercifully, with nobody present to watch it. Mikko Koskinen was a struggling goalie making a lot of money with the Oilers in 2021, and that, combined with the entire world being suffocated by social distancing, did not make Edmonton fans happy campers with him. On May 6th of 2021, he and his gang were facing the Vancouver Canucks, who were very injured and losers of their last 6 games, and had been without starter Thatcher Demko until recently. Some things never change. They'd lost 5 of 7 to the Oilers that season already. The Oilers, on the other hand, were great and had clinched a playoff spot. Connor McDavid was chasing 100 points, and with 3 assists in this game he'd get to 96. But it was at the other end of the ice, and far earlier in the night, that the game was decided. The first goal against was a defensive breakdown, but a really good shot from in tied by Höglander. It's not really Koskinen's fault. A rebound falls right to Jack Rathbone, sick name by the way, and he rips it glove side. That's another one that'd be tough for him to stop, but this save has been made before. A minute and a half later, Koskinen's blocker gets overpowered. Gotta stop that one. And a few minutes later, the same thing. He's just late reacting. Koskinen allowed 4 goals on 4 shots in 12:22 of playing time. All 4 of these were the only shots Koskinen faced. He had a save percentage of 0. The Oilers made a game of it, outshooting the Canucks 42-27 and making it 4-2 and 5-3, but couldn't overcome the deficit. The 6'7" Koskinen had the same massage therapist as Kobe Bryant once did. Why am I bringing that up, you ask? Let's have a moment of silence in honor of these beautiful jerseys. Alright, Damian Rhodes was the first Atlanta Thrasher ever. He, or rather his rights, were traded to the franchise the summer before the 1999 expansion draft. He was effectively their starter for their first 2 seasons of existence, and the backup to Milan Nelichka for the third. He's probably best known for scoring a goalie goal without shooting the puck. It was a delayed penalty, and the opposing Devils accidentally wafted the puck back into their own net. Since he was the last Senator to touch it, the goal counted as his. Sadly, there'd be no such memories in this game. Rhodes was coming in hot, having made a season-high 35 saves against the Wild in his last start. In 10th place, Mikko Koskinen gave up his first 3 in the first 6 minutes 33 seconds. On January 5th, 2001, Damian Rhodes gave up 3 in a third of that time. 2 minutes and 19 seconds. That's a 77.7 GAA. Sadly, no footage exists for this game anywhere I can find it, which is sadly a common theme on this list, but we do have access to the play-by-play. Ruslan Fedotenko beat him with a high shot through a screen 42 seconds in. At 1:38, Justin Williams deflected a shot past him, which there wasn't much he could do about, and Keith Primo beat Rhodes with another deflection shortly afterwards. He got pulled for Nelichka, who, the last time he played, went a terrible 4 for 8 on shots against the Islanders. Despite trailing 5-0 halfway through the game, the Thrashers actually came back within 1 with goals from Brunette, Odgers, Tamer, and Audette. Roman Cechmanek made some clutch saves in the final minute on Patrick Steffen and Andrew Brunette to maintain the Flyers' lead and prevent them from squandering it. Mark Recchi hit a slap shot into the empty net in the final minute to stave off the comeback. After this game, the Thrashers were 0-3-1 since getting above 500 for the first time in franchise history. It wasn't easy being a Thrasher. You'll find that the top 10 has a strict dichotomy between games where a goalie couldn't stop anything for the whole game, and games where the goalies let in everything immediately and then got lifted. This is the former. Grant Fuhr was the first black goalie to play in the NHL and the first to win the Stanley Cup. He backstopped the Oilers dynasty of the late 80s, but you see him here in a Maple Leafs jersey. Well, the Oilers needed to clear salary to acquire young talent, so they shipped Fuhr and others to Toronto in a trade tree that starts with them and ends with Sam Carrick. On Boxing Day, the Maple Leafs would play the Penguins. The 1992 Leafs were bad, and the 1992 Penguins were going to win the Stanley Cup. Jack Riley, the first GM in Penguins history, was the goal judge that night. It was probably the highlight of his goal judge career, if such a thing exists. Fuhr actually played the whole 60 minutes and made 20 saves, which is actually the most out of these top 10. The problem is, he allowed 12 goals. The Penguins had all the chances to start the game, which foreshadowed how it would go. Mario Lemieux bent the Maple Leafs defense over a barrel and executed them with his wizardry about 1 billion times in this game, so that was something to see. Repeatedly, Grant Fuhr was left out to dry by his defensemen, but there were a couple that he probably should have had. Sometimes there was nothing he could do, and sometimes he just got pantsed. It for sure would have been a defeat anyway, for sure. But it probably would not have been 12 goals or even 6 if Fuhr was on top of his game. The Penguins scored so much that the entirety of the recap column from the AP was just describing their goals. The Toronto Sun said the Leafs played like minimum wage straight men. The Pittsburgh Press said they were treated like unwanted in-laws. The Winnipeg Sun straight up said the Leafs might want to reconsider having Fuhr on the team, referring to him as once considered the greatest goalie in the game, as if this game single-handedly removed him from all discourse of respect in the NHL. Kevin Stevens said, "You don't want to go out and kill a team like that." Not exactly a sterling defense of murder. Mario Lemieux had proposed to his girlfriend Natalie Aslan the day before, so I guess the Penguins were in a celebratory mood. exiting the night with a 47.5 shooting percentage, but -1 bachelor. We follow that up with another holiday nightmare, but this time we finally crack the infamous decade of the 1980s. Remember way back when, like a minute ago, when Damian Rhodes allowed 3 goals in 2 minutes and 19 seconds? New Jersey Devils goalie Alain Chevrier allowed 3 goals on 3 shots in 1 minute and 21 seconds. His opponent, the Capitals, had beat the Devils 8 straight times. Their goalie, Al Jensen, was 13-0-1 against them before that night. David Jensen scored on a deflection 26 seconds in. Greg Adams tapped in a misplayed bounce off the end boards 27 seconds later, and 28 seconds after that, Mike Gartnered the puck from a sharp angle to make it 3-0 in 81 seconds. And Chevrier's gone. It's that simple. Sometimes there is no interesting story. Except that there is. This game is unique in the top 10 because it is the only one where the goalie's team actually came back to win the game. Something that doesn't happen again until you get down to 44th on the list. The Devils returned fire and won 6-4. The turning point was Chevrier being pulled. The goal is now occupied by Kirk McLean, who with this game got his second career win. He had a 4-13 record with the Maine Mariners in the AHL and was only called up to that game because backup Chris Terreri had the flu. Funny enough, McLean's first career win came the season prior where he gave up 7 goals on 27 shots and won. And this win, which poor Alain Chevrier had no part of, ended up being the Devils' 100th as the Devils since relocating from Colorado. As for Chevrier's part, in a few years he will be traded from the Jets to the Blackhawks to relieve a goaltending logjam and will lead them on a run in 1989 all the way to the conference finals. That's probably what he's best remembered for. Not this game, thank goodness. Continuing our decade-by-decade slide into the past, now we're in the 70s. Gary Innes was the starter of a pretty new Pittsburgh Penguins team, which was just starting to become competitive. But in the 1970s, against the Montreal Canadiens, nobody had a prayer. The newspapers all say the same thing. The Canadiens ran circles around the Penguins in the first period, sometimes literally. They scored 3 goals fairly quickly, and Innes was pulled at 9:37 of the first, but returned 35 seconds later. As soon as he got to the bench, coach Marc Boileau said to him that he'd be going out at the next whistle. His relief, Andy Brown, was only in for 1 stoppage, 35 seconds. In those 35 seconds, the Canadiens had 7 shots. Assuming you have the puck for half the game, your team is getting 123 shots in regulation. Let this forever stand as a monument to the fact that being barraged doesn't necessarily equate with starting a game poorly. I feel like this must be an error, though. The 7 must be a transliterated 1, right? The Canadiens can't be that dominant, right? If Innes didn't go back in, 3 goals on what I estimate to be 5 shots in 9:37 would have been the 53rd worst of all time. But it got even worse because he allowed 4 more goals on only a handful of shots for the rest of the game, because the Canadiens were cruising. So, while it wasn't a full 60 minutes, Innes basically did play the full game, yielding a 7-1 defeat. This isn't the only ignoble title Gary Innes shoulders. In the following year, Innes would be the starter for the Penguins when they blew a 3-0 series lead against the Islanders, thus being the first team in the modern NHL era to do so, and one of 4 teams to do it ever. Scott Gordon was the first ever ECHL player to eventually debut in the NHL. Though he only stuck for 20 or so games, he was nonetheless a trailblazer. Though it didn't help that the 1990 Nordiques he was thrust into the ranks of were terrible. And in that early February, they were playing the powerhouse Washington Capitals, who were in the midst of a 2 or 3 year period where they had the most pants-crappingly terrifying defenseman ever. Scott Stevens, in particular, was returning from a broken foot on this night, so No pressure, Gordo. Let me give you guys a warning. Leaving Scott Gordon in net for the full duration of this game was a cruel and unusual punishment, because this tilt holds the Capitals' record for most goals in a single game. Right away, you know it's going to be a tough start, because Gordon does that cartwheel thing when he didn't need to, because Stevens shot it right into him. Gordon gets beat by a great deke, but it only happened because of a weak defensive play at the line, which led to a breakaway. Not his fault. And then it was followed up again by another breakaway. But he doesn't actually bite on the deke this time, so I do kind of wonder how it gets by him. It just seems to go through his pad. Then it's another breakaway, and another deke, and another bite by Gordon. Play stops exactly once before another goal is given up. This one has to be stopped. Gordon makes 2 saves and gets some Bronx cheers. And then a blast from Michael Pavanka goes right through the wickets. That is inexcusable. Did they pull him at this point after giving up almost a touchdown and clearly not being on his game? No. Gordon gets all kinds of turnaround and Cicerelli just puts it through him. And then Cicerelli was like, why don't I do that again? And beat him on a clean shot. It was really well placed. That's not really on Gordon. What's a clunker of a goalie performance without a Looney Tunes goal? A pop-up redirection somehow falls on a hapless Gordon and goes in. We finally made it to the third period, and Dale Hunter taps in a goal as Gordon falls down. Cicerelli was left wide open in the slot for the 11-1 goal and a hat trick, and Gordon finally shows some frustration after it becomes 12-1. He barely tried for this goal. The only reason this drubbing is higher on the list than Fuhr's is because Scott Gordon made 1 fewer save, but effectively, they are the same kind of sad. For what it's worth, Nordique's coach Michel Bergeron said he thought Scott Gordon did a good job, yeah right, and didn't replace him because he figured he wouldn't waste number 1 goalie Greg Millen on a lost cause. Maybe he just wanted to keep Gordon in because that night, it was his birthday. His 27th birthday. It really is a cursed number, isn't it? Almost exactly a year later, a very young Jeff Hackett, playing in his rookie season, would play in a game that featured some of the funniest names to ever lace him up. Bill Berg, Patrick Flatley, Wayne McBean, Bobby Dallas, Doug Huda, and of course, Rick Zombo. Before we get to the highlights, I should emphasize one thing that really makes this start stink. Hackett's Islanders outshot the Detroit Red Wings 49-16. 49 were the most shots allowed by the Red Wings that season, and 16 the second lowest generated to that point. When your team is rolling opponents like that, you have to hold up your end of the bargain, especially if you only see 16 shots. That night, Jeff Hackett allowed 8 goals. But despite that, Hackett actually had the best start to his game of any goalie on this list, not letting in a goal until very late in the first after making some great stops. A lot of folks were left open in the slot, but, I mean, some of them are difficult saves to make. Some of them I've seen made before. What stings about this performance is that it's more about the quantity of shots he faced than the quality. You can only say, well, I guess that was a hard stop to make so many times before you think, alright guy, you gotta make a save. The 2-point conversion could have been stopped if Hackett didn't deploy that cursed cartwheel. But he did, and thus gave up 8. Said Jeff Hackett after the game, "It can't get any worse than tonight. This was embarrassing. As a matter of fact, this is the worst thing that has ever happened to me." I hope he's okay. Dan Bouchard is the OG Flame from the 1972 expansion into Atlanta. And on that fateful night, March 27th, 1979, stop me if you've heard this before, he'd be playing against the 70s Canadiens, who would go on to win the Cup that year. 25 seconds into the game, Atlanta scored. They led the game, which is such a rarity for the protagonistic teams on this list. But then Jacques Lemaire scored 25 seconds later on the first shot. Less than 4 minutes later, Steve Shutt beat Bouchard on the second shot. 41 seconds later, Mark Napier beat him on the third shot. Schutt came back for seconds less than half a minute later, and Bouchard was beat 4 times on 4 shots in just 5 minutes and 37 seconds. Less than half of the time for Koskinen's 4-4. The Flames actually made something of a comeback, but damage was done. It was a loss. Apparently, Dan Bouchard's nickname is the Reverend due to his strong Catholic faith, and like any good Catholic, he had immaculate drip. I bring it up because it's a shame that a goalie with this much drip got lit up so badly. But it wasn't all that common for him. Over the course of his career, Bouchard played in 656 games and was good. Not great, but he had a handful of solid seasons, across half a dozen of which he got Calder, Hart, and Vezina considerations. This was possibly Bouchard's career low point. He had been in a 3-week stretch of really poor games, and it was causing many, including himself, to have doubts about his future as a starter in Atlanta. But he saved 59 of 64 shots to close out the season, and had a career high with the Flames the following year. His career stats are like a tour through a graveyard. The Atlanta Flames, the Quebec Nordiques, and the OG Winnipeg Jets line his player card, with only 14 games as a Calgary Flame being for a team that remains in play. If you recognize that photo of him in the Nordiques jersey, that's because he was their starter in playoffs past 5. Here's a fun coincidence, I guess. Dan Bouchard's start in 1979 and Jeff Hackett's start in 1991 both feature defenseman Brad Marsh and essentially bookend his career. That has no bearing on the story, I just thought it was interesting. Michel Dion is quite well known for his feed bag mask, a standard fiberglass mask with an elongated snout that extends to the jawline and looks both badass and utterly ghoulish. It's a good psychological litmus test for hockey fans, really. But indisputably, it has just as much drip as Bouchard's kit. Anyway, at the end of January in 1982, a year he would be a Vezina finalist, poor Michel Dion was thrust in front of the 1980s Islanders, who created the dynasty that followed the Canadiens in the 1970s. They won the Cup the prior 2 years and were going to win the next 2, including that season. Dion himself was also winless in 6 attempts against the Islanders, so every indication was that this game was going to be as bad as it was. Dwayne Sutter scores at 1:31 on a slot shot. John Tonelli gets the second off a centering feed. Brian Trottier gets 2 more off of freak bounces, and Sutter double dips for the 5th at the 4:08 mark. 5 goals in the first 4 minutes and 8 seconds. But all of them were scored only 2 minutes and 36 seconds apart. The second fastest 5-goal avalanche in league history. According to the clippings after the fact, in those first 4 minutes, the puck never entered the Islanders' zone. They never missed a pass. 3 of the goals were 2-on-0s. All 5 of them were at point-blank range. 1 goal saw the puck bounce off the glass behind the net and land right in front of Dion. That night, Michel Dion became a side of beef. One interesting thing from the postgame quotes is that all of the Penguins coaches and players said that there was no time to think. The Islanders were that fast and that good. It was a 9-2 laugher in front of almost 15,000 fans at Nassau Coliseum. It soured the moment for Dion, because within 24 hours he would be announced as the starting goalie for the 1982 All-Star Game. What likely prevents this from being the all-time worst start is that Dion did make one save. A solitary stop. One little bit of resistance. And that saves him from having the ultimate crown of terrible goalieship. Now, I'm not too pedantic about the order of numbers 2 through 10 in this list. They're all such bottom-of-the-barrel starts that it's really hard to distinctly say one should be ranked above the other, aside from 1 or 2 of them. But this? Number 1 now takes everything bad about all the prior starts and compresses them into one godforsaken game. Bad save percentages, weak goals, not improving despite playing the full game, and worst of all, doing badly despite so little actually being required of you. Fun for the whole family. Now, this one game is not an accurate reflection of Antti Ranta's career. He was a pretty solid goalie, especially that year. He had 14 straight home wins for the Canes and was a 4-0-0 with a 1.49 GAA to that point in the season. In no game did he allow more than 4 goals. He had left the previous game after one period due to an injury scare, but he was good to go that night. How little he knew. Let me just show you what happened. Hide your kids. Goal 1. Ranta plays it perfectly, there's just no stopping Stamkos' one-timer. But that was the only shot by the Bolts of the first period. Second goal. A great heads-up cross-ice pass by Hagel to Kucherov gets by Ranta. Again, that would be a difficult save to make, not on him. On the power play, Ranta and the defense bite on Kucherov's fake, leaving Point wide open at the net mouth. 3 goals allowed, only facing 7 shots going into the third period. If he got pulled then, that would be the 24th worst start in league history. But he stays in. Odd man rush. The cross-ice pass to Hagel is not in his wheelhouse, but he goes over Ranta's shoulder. Ranta looks like he was going the other way. I think he bit in the opposite direction. I can't be sure, though. Very shortly thereafter, he barely sees Chernak's muffin to the net and doesn't get the wraparound rebound. Tough goal. 2 goals on 3 shots against in the third. 6th goal, Point with a wide open net. On the very next shot, 7th goal, Kucherov with a quick release. On again the very next shot, 8th goal, hat trick, and a coveted snowman. It may have seemed like I just breezed through the entire game and that I left out all of Ranta's work, but I didn't. That was literally the majority of everything Ranta saw that night. Allowing 8 goals in a game is bad. Very bad. Allowing 8 goals on 14 shots across a full game is inexcusable. Allowing multiple soft goals compounds that further. The Lightning and their power play were really good, and still are, but so are the Hurricanes and their defense. At some point, you have to say the goalie has got to make the stops. Antti Ranta was in net for the whole game on November 24th, 2023, and he made 6 saves. Only 4 full games by a goalie have ever seen them make just 6. None gave up more goals than Ranta. Oh, hi, Gary. No goalie that faced 15 or fewer shots in a full game let in that many goals, ever. The only games that come close are Gary Innes's 1 fewer goal on 1 fewer shot, and Jeff Hackett's same 8 goals on 2 more shots. Even if you remove the full game time condition, Ranta still stands alone. And finally, there's not a single goalie in any full game that has ever been played in the NHL that had a worse save percentage. .429 is far and away the very worst ever. By every conceivable metric, including my made-up one, this is the worst game a goalie has ever had in NHL history. And that's it. Like I said, all of these games are just tiny, tiny samples of the full body of work that these athletes put into their lives to make it into the greatest hockey league on earth. And thus, being so tiny, there's no use in trying to draw conclusions or lessons from them. You're allowed to have a bad night. You're allowed to have a terrible night. That's just how it goes sometimes in a random sport like hockey. But some days, you're not allowed to have a terrible night. Because some nights count for way, way more. Thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate it as usual. And once again, I would like to thank especially my patrons, Caniac, Legacy WW, Jackson W, no relation, Tweeta the Rut, Tiebreaker, Samuel Silvas, Montpelier, Tristan Daly, Lammy, FZ, Crazy Canuck, Sarah, Shamu, RJ, AC1 Sentinel, I'm cramped inside, Len Nicolosi, Pierre O'Connor, Infernos Gaming, Steely Dan 32, Gabriel Arrigo, Amazing Kook 143, and Eric Sheldon.